Hello, everybody. This is Aaron Scott, and today we're going to be going into how video games can be educational. Now, some of you may have questions or reservations, or just not even believe me, but give me some time, and I'll see if I can convince you. Now, video games have come a long way from when I was a kid. I had the Atari, I had the NES, I had the Super NES, I had the PlayStation, and all those have been stepping stones to what games are now. And what games are now is really for the family, and there's more of a market for that than there ever has been before. Now, granted, there are games that you play by yourself, and there's games that you play online with people, and all those I think can benefit at one way or another, and I'm going to tell you how in a minute. Um, but I really do believe that video games are going to be the pathway to education later down the road, and maybe not that far, maybe only 5 or 10 years from now. Maybe my kids are going to be involved in that generation. I got three, so um, it's possible. Now, I've broken this down to about three different categories that I think video games can help you, and it's physical, mental, technical. Now, the physical part, you're going to say, well, you're only sitting there playing the game. How much exercise can you really have? But I'm not just talking about physical as in movement. I'm talking about what it can help on the small parts. Like, okay, for instance, your hand-eye coordination. Infinitely better. If you were to do a comparison from 50 years ago to now, I'm sure it's 10, 20-fold better than it was back then as far as hand-eye coordination. And I think that's mainly due to video games. You sit in front of a screen and you react to what's on the screen, and that's the formula, and that's how it works. So that right there, I think, is a huge leap for us. Now, granted, you can do that with sports, you can do that with a lot of other things, but I think video games reaches a mass market, and I think if video games do more for you on a larger scale. Your reflexes also, as far as I can tell, reflexes are faster for people that play video games because you have that jump, you have that apprehension, you have that eye to look for your next action, and I don't think that comes from the world. I think that comes from playing a game and really getting into it. Now, physically, you do have to put into perspective that games have come full circle into being used for in more of a physical way. The Nintendo Wii broke barriers with that. I mean, the controller moves, and when it moves, when it moves, the game moves, and that's a huge step. And Nintendo saved themselves with that. That technology is what put them back into the game, and you have to keep that into consideration when you're talking about video games. You can't just say, well, it's just the shooter games or it's just the adventure games. All of these apply, so you can't just look at it from one direction. Now we're going to go into some mental stuff here. We're going to go into the mental as far as concentration. Now, me myself, I had a hard time concentrating when I was a kid, and video games kind of broke me of that, because when you lose at a game, you want to go right back into it and do more and get further and past that one stage you couldn't do. I can remember getting up in the middle of the night and going to play with sound down, all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure, some of y'all did that too. And maybe your kids do it and you don't know about it. Maybe that's something you should check. But I really do believe concentration is a big, big key when it comes to playing video games, because you get so focused on that one task and that one boss and that one objective that I don't think a lot of kids get that from any other place. Sports can try to do that to you. If your kid's really good at natural at sports, I'm sure that will gear them towards that way of thinking. But the average kid is not going to be that way. The average kid is going to want to have it almost fed to them. And video games, they teach you without teaching you. And I think that's one of the tricks of it, is that when your kid decides, okay, I don't want to go outside and play. I want to stay inside and play a game. Well, granted, it depends on the game. Not all games are going to help you. Some games don't do anything for you, and I'm going to be the first person to admit that. Aside from the hand-eye coordination and the concentration, which I think applies to all of them. But and you have to think endurance has to be factored in there, because I've done 70, 80 hours up playing games. It sounds stupid now, but when you were 14, 15 and you had that kind of energy, it's something that we like to do. I can remember going through and saying, okay, we're going to beat this game, and this game this week, or this weekend. And, to us, it wasn't that big a deal. To us, it was just, okay, I'm going to go over to this guy's house, and, it's pizza, soda, and video games, and that's all we did. Um, and this is, you gotta remember, this is back in the '90s when video games were really just coming up. You didn't have next gen console, you didn't have PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3. You had the old games, and I think they paid more attention to storyline back then, and I think that they're more engaging. And then I think some games are lazy now. I'm gonna say that right off, and some aren't. But definitely when it comes to endurance and concentration, I mean, holding a controller and staring at a screen that long. I mean, you have to factor in computer games too. World of Warcraft, people play that game for days at a time. I mean, no other activity is going to require that amount of focus and that amount of effort, and you really have to put that into perspective. Is if somebody learns that young and they learn to transition that into life, then you can really tap into a really incredible talent to be able to be up and to concentrate for that long. I'm going to get into the technical side now, because most of the things that I know technically I learned to a degree from video games. Networking, number one, with every game integrating into Facebook and online, and you can show your friends what you're doing, and there's just so much of a bigger world now than there ever was when I played games. And I've tapered off when you get older, but I do really have to tell you that when it comes to the experience, it's so much more now than it ever was before for me. World of Warcraft, millions of people play that game a day, and some of them, yeah, okay, they you have to spend money, and it's a hardship for some people, and it's not for everybody. But the amount of focus and the amount of hand speed required, I mean, look up what it takes to really do well in that game. You'll be surprised. Now, when it comes down to the social part of playing the game, I'm going to throw this in there. I know it's not really educational, but I really have to say that playing a game gives you kind of an identity. At least it did when I played it. If they say, what game do you play? And you say, I play this. Well, you wouldn't say that unless you thought you could beat that person. So I really think that your child can get an identity from playing the game and from having that kind of confidence. If you beat somebody at a game, you feel better about yourself, and it's not as barbaric as fighting somebody. It's not a war of words. There's no emotions hurt. There's no real damage done. When it comes down to playing a game and beating somebody at it. And now you can play anybody around the world, so you won't even have to see them or know them or ever really deal with them ever again. And I think that's another tool. I really have to talk about sharing things, because now with the PlayStation 4 coming out, the Xbox One, sharing is a really big part of their marketing, and that you can share games and lend people games and play across a network where no matter where you're at, if anybody has that console, you sign in with that username, you're right back at home with all of your same content. Now that kind of universal ability has never been around before, and it's a more of a groundbreaking idea than we've ever had. And I really have to say that this is leaps and bounds, and it will show your kids so much more than just doing the textbook school scenario. It tells them so much more. And I'm a real believer in this. My kids have, a Wii, they have tablets, they have phones, and they play games and all of these things. We have a Wii, we play, Smash Brothers Brawl, every so often during the weekend, and they love that game. And there's some healthy competition, and they learn to win, to lose, and that's another thing. Not everybody's going to win at everything right off the bat, and you really have to understand how to lose and how to win. And I think that is really a big deal when it comes to life. And that's another thing that games can teach you, is to embody and say, okay, I lost, but I'll play again and I'll get better. And it gives them that kind of drive, and you really have to look at that. The same thing if they go and take a test and they don't do well on it. Well, you don't want them to throw up their arms and say, okay, I'm done, I don't want to do it anymore. If they have that background, that mental readiness where they say, okay, I did that wrong the first time, I'm not going to do it wrong again. And they're going to use that mental readiness and that mental toughness to get them through that. And that's really what I'm trying to say, is that video games can do so much more for you than just entertain you. They can make you a better person. They really, truly can. And I believe that. And I believe partially I'm living proof of that. So, with that, I'm going to leave you with that. If you want to go further and research this and tell me what you think, I'd be glad to to hear any comment you got. And I hope you guys all enjoyed the show. See you later.